Hey, how's it going? Today's video is not a progress video, but instead I wanted to talk about this poll that just ended, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation out there, or people who just think it's ridiculous that this was even pulled. And for anyone new to the channel, hi, how are ya? I'm Wild Mudkip, and as you can see, I've been playing UIM for way too long. There were 2 UIM only questions on this recent poll, and yes, that means only UIMs had a say and could vote on these. The first one asked if UIM should be able to store the new bow in the master stash unit like other accounts can, but that's not the question that we're talking about today. Question 6 is what we're talking about. Jagex is making an update to the game where everyone will be able to put items into a looting bag in Ferox Enclave. However, because the looting bag has become such an iconic part of the UIM game mode, they gave a poll question specifically to see if UIMs wanted to be excluded from this update. Now, I'm not here to discuss whether or not the looting bag itself goes against the integrity of the game mode, because it's part of the game, and personally, as someone who goes for high scores, it would be against my own self-interest to add a self-imposed restriction on my account, such as not using a looting bag, because to me, UIM is all about taking full advantage of the game's mechanics. I'm going to show this on my main because first off, my looting bag is full on the UIM, and second off, there's a lot of spoilers on the UIM right now as well because the videos are still a bit behind, but it works the same way on any account. In case you don't know, I want to show you what the looting bag is and how it works. There's currently 2 ways to get a looting bag in the game, and this is very important. The first way is by killing monsters in the wilderness, which you have anywhere from a 1 in 15 chance to a 1 in 3 chance based on the combat level of the monster. And the other method is by doing last man standing. You can buy a looting bag from the shop there for 1 LMS point. Now, what the looting bag does and why it's so useful for UIM is that it allows you to store 28 items or stacks of items in there. However, the only way to put items into a looting bag is to be in the wilderness. So right now, if I try to put an item in there, you'll see I get the message that I have to be in the wilderness. I step 1 step into the wilderness, and now you can see I can put it in the bag and then step out of the wilderness. But to get the items out of the looting bag, you'll see it's not too easy. There's no option to just take the items out. And that's because the main way to get the items out of a looting bag is to be in a bank interface. So if we come over to the bank here, you'll see we can view the looting bag and then deposit all the items into the bank from there. But obviously UIMs don't have a bank interface, so they have a couple options for what they can do. When a UIM dies, the looting bag is destroyed and the items pop out of it. And this first option you see right here is a death pile. For those of you that have been playing old school for more than a year, UIMs have the old death mechanics where they have death piles that last for 1 hour. You can have multiple death piles which each have their original 1 hour timer running simultaneously, and you could die anywhere else in the game and these items will still be there on the ground, whether it's to a PvP death, a PvM death. So this is what UIMs do when they go into the wildy. The other option is to die to a boss with an item retrieval service such as Hispori, Zora, Vorkath, etc. After you pay a fee, you can start taking your items out, but you can't put them back in. You also have to take out the full stack of the item that you pick. You can't just take out X amount. But if you die anywhere in the game with your items in a death storage, all those items will be deleted. So death storages are only for skilling. You can, however, die in a safe place though, like pest control or the fight caves, for example, and your items would be safe then. There is one other way to get your items out of a looting bag though, and that is just to destroy the looting bag. But you need to be in the wilderness, because if you destroy the looting bag and you're not in the wilderness, all the items in there will be deleted. But if you're in the wilderness and you destroy it, all the items will pop up onto the ground, but they will be immediately viewable for everyone to see immediately, and they'll all despawn after 1 minute. So unless you're like a really early game UIM and you don't have too many items, that's not really a method that UIMs generally do. Now, this question did pass the poll. You can see we had a massive turnout for the UIMs. Over 1,100 people voted yes or no, which means that once this update comes into the game, which I assume will probably be like within 2 weeks most likely, or however long it takes for Jagex to implement this, that means that UIMs will instead be able to bag in the Ferox Enclave. So instead of having to go into the wildy and put items in the bag, go to the jewelry box, teleport to Ferox Enclave, and right from here, everyone in the game, including UIMs, will be able to put items into a looting bag right here. Like I said, Jagex decided to add this into the game for everyone and then also see if UIMs wanted to be excluded from this. But why would they add this into the game? Well, there's a few bosses in the game, like I think Serb, Calvite Queen, maybe some others, where people use a looting bag to suicide supplies at a boss so they can instead stay at the boss a lot longer than they would otherwise be able to. So it's just a very, very minor quality of life thing for normie accounts. Instead of having to run a few tiles over into the wildy, they could just do it directly right from here. For UIMs though, this is of course a little bit of a different change, and that's that putting items into a looting bag will be completely safe. What some people might not realize though is that bagging items on a UIM was already completely safe. Before this change happens, there is currently 2 ways to safely bag items on a UIM, and I will show you how both of those work. So if we go to the POH, here's the first method. You can go to the costume room or go to Diango, you go to the toy box, and from here or from Diango, you can grab out any fun weapon. So for example, we'll take the birthday prop sword, and if we equip it, you will see that it has negative a bunch of stats here. So we're pretty much always going to hit zeros. What we do is make our way over to Edgeville, and you'll see there's skeletons in this area around here. So if you have a ranged weapon on you, you could just aggro them from anywhere, or just wait for them to walk up to the ditch, and we could start attacking one, and you'll see we'll just keep on hitting zeros over and over because of all the negative bonuses that we have. Every once in a while, you may hit a few damage as well, but for the most part, you can box the skeleton for a long time. By the way, boxing is the term used when you purposely try to do little to no damage, which is usually used as a way to avoid being attacked by PKers in the wildy in single combat zones, which as you can see, there's no cross swords here, so this is a single combat area, which is why we get into a boxing match with the skeleton here. Now, something a lot of UIMs don't realize when they're bagging their items is that when you're boxing the skeleton, you have to actually hit it, because if you just stand here and you put items into the looting bag, like if you have auto retaliate off, the skeleton can easily be tagged off of you. You're not safe doing this. When you're boxing the skeleton, you have to like attack it after every item you put in. I want to say there's like 1 tick of buffer room or something where a PKer can attack the skeleton. So you just want to make sure you're just constantly attacking the skeleton over and over as you put the items in. And then once you're done, you can step out of the wildy and you've bagged completely safe. And don't fall for that guy's tricks. He's trying to lure you. Here, I'll even show you as an example right here. So we're going to step into the wildy. We got auto retaliate on, so we're attacking the skeleton. If we bring this account over here, you'll see if we try to attack Mudkip, someone else is already fighting your opponent. This is how you stay safe from PKers on a UIM. You can see if we try to attack the skeleton, can't attack the skeleton either. But if we stop attacking on this account, we can come over here and you could see I can just kill the skeleton. Now, if there's someone in max gear who does that, they could just one-shot the skeleton and then one-shot you with their main or a second account using Durox or whatever, and then you'll be wrecked. So that's why you gotta constantly attack the skeleton. Now, let me show you the one other method that UIMs can use to safely bag their items. So if we step into the wildy, we can attack this alt account, and I guess if we just put on Prey Melee on both accounts, we can stay here pretty much forever. Using overheads doesn't completely negate damage when you're in a PvP scenario, but I mean, you know it's your own alt account, you have auto retaliate on both accounts, and ideally this second account right here would have like a fun weapon on them as well as max tank gear, and you would just keep them here at the ditch forever, and whenever you want to put items into your looting bag, you just log onto your alt and then box them and get your items in the bag and then log off when you're done. Now the argument is that you see UIMs die all the time, like on Twitter or Reddit or in YouTube videos. You see UIMs get PK'd and they lose all their items. Well, that's a risk that they choose to take. Whether it's because they don't care or they're just misinformed, it is not a risk that inherently comes with using a looting bag, because as I just proved, it is already completely safe to put items into a looting bag if you know the proper procedure. Now, here's the part where things get spicy, and the thing that some people might not be aware of. Jagex has confirmed that they are making a change that will make the whole wildy into singles plus, just like the rev caves are now. Which I am totally not against, by the way. I mean, I don't really care either way because I don't do PvP or go into the wildy much, and if I do go in the wildy, I know exactly what I'm risking. What singles plus means is that if you're in the wilderness and you're attacking an NPC, any other player that's able to attack you can attack you, even if you're fighting another monster. So once that comes into the game, boxing skeletons will no longer be possible, which means that the only way to safely bag on a UIM will be to use an alt account. Like I said, this is one of the options now, but in the future, once this change does come into the game, which Jagex said it will, the only safe way to bag on a UIM will be to keep an alt at the wildy ditch with either a fun weapon or splashing gear or whatever to make the wilderness zero risk for your account. And in my opinion, if the only option is to use an alt to gain an advantage in a single player game mode, I think that's a pretty steep integrity issue, personally. Now, of course, if the whole wildy singles plus wasn't going to be a thing, then yeah, this update wouldn't make sense and they shouldn't have pulled this or even thought about pulling it in the first place. But it's because of the fact they're making the wildy singles plus is why they made this poll question and why Ferox bagging is going to be coming into the game. Now, if Jagex made it so that level 1 wildy wasn't singles plus, so you weren't forced to use an alt, or if they made it so that you you somehow can't box alts, neither of which I think is really doable for them, that would be a completely different story, but that's just not how it is. Next thing to mention is that this update isn't all sunshine and roses and rainbows for UIM. It does come with a trade-off. Currently, the way a lot of UIMs get their looting bag is by going to the spiders in level 5-ish wildy, which have a 1 out of 4 drop rate of dropping the looting bag, and this is considered generally safe because it's single combat and you're constantly being attacked by spiders, which also means a PKer would be constantly attacked by spiders too, which should give you plenty of time to teleport if you see a PKer. And if you're teleblocked, it's a short run to the exit, and because you generally have an empty inventory when you're getting a looting bag, you can pretty much bring a full inventory of food, which is what I always do. But because the wildy is becoming singles plus, I doubt many UIMs will be coming here for their looting bags anymore. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the only other way to get a looting bag is by buying them from LMS. So UIMs are pretty much forced into doing LMS, which some UIMs already do for their bags anyways. I personally have always gotten them from the spiders, but it looks like I'll have to start practicing my PvP a bit more. And I mean, having to do LMS for your looting bag is kind of a trade-off in itself. Like on one hand, a lot of UIMs probably don't enjoy doing PvP, but on the other hand, I mean, it's just completely safe. I mean, of course, there was still the risk to going to the spiders, even if it was very little, but getting your bag from LMS is just completely safe. I've messed around at LMS a few times before just to get some emergency bags saved up, and I just wanted to flex that there was one time I actually won, but normally it takes me like 10 minutes to even get a kill. But hey, that's just part of learning and improving, right? Also, that might have been a bot, but that's besides the point. My goal, not necessarily as a content creator, but as someone who's passionate about the UIM game mode, is to get as many people interested in UIM as possible, and I want the community to only grow larger over time, not smaller. The last major UIM change was the costume room update, which I know for a fact brought a bunch of new people to try out the game mode. And I hope one of the side effects of making these kinds of changes as well is also that it brings new players to try out UIM. One other update, which I really want to see, I proposed to Jagex in June of 2020 after the death mechanics update, is UIM Specific Gravestones. And they would work exactly the same how death piles do now, except they'd be in a gravestone. So you could have multiple death piles, they'd be in the same world that you died, maybe make it 55 minutes instead of 1 hour to account for certain technicalities. UIM Specific Gravestones would essentially prevent two things from happening that they can't do with death piles. First is when the servers go offline or crash, those timers are still running, and if your client crashes, well, you better hope you remember your world. With UIM gravestones, the timers would be paused on logout, and it would tell you the world, maybe even the location, of each gravestone. And the other thing it would do is bypass the 128 ground item limit, because if there's more than 128 items in a 9x9 radius, items start getting deleted based on the lowest GE value, or the game's nominal value if it's untradeable. And whether that's caused by malicious players or just two UIM suiciding in the same world at the same spot, in my opinion, that's a problem with the game mode. I personally don't believe a game mechanic should be losing your items to things out of your control, and it sucks that like hardcore Ironmen die to server lag all the time, and that's things that they just can't control and Jagex can't fix. This, however, is something that can be changed, and if it happened, I believe there would be another spike of players trying out UIM. As I said, these gravestones wouldn't give UIMs access to death or change how the mechanics work. It would just simply hold your items in a gravestone rather than just be on the ground, which would allow those two issues I just mentioned to be bypassed. When I originally mentioned the idea, it was just shot down, but now, a year later, as you can tell by the screenshots, Jagex are more interested in making this happen. And I just want to say thanks to Mod Light for being open and willing to talk with and work with the UIM community. And it's just unreal in general how easy it is for us as players to communicate to JMods. So shout out to them, they're real people, not just a corporate entity. Anyways, I know I kind of went way off track and I ended up talking about more than just Ferox bagging and the singles plus change like I originally planned to. I guess this is like a UIM news kind of gossip video. I know there's really only like one other gossip channel for Runescape on YouTube. So hopefully this video fits some kind of niche for a UIM gossip video or something. But mainly, I hope this video cleared up misconceptions about why this poll happened. A lot of people already knew this, but I think a lot of other people didn't. And I'm sure some UIMs voted yes due to their own self-interest and not because of the actual reasons I went over in this video. And I'm sure some UIMs voted no, also due to their own self-interest of the hours they put into UIM before this change. That's most likely just a handful of players, but I think the majority of people voted for what they truly think is best for the game mode. It goes both ways, right? It's not all black and white. The community behind it is just another reason why I fell in love with the game mode, even if a lot of people disagree, which tends to happen happen a lot, it really is amazing to see just how passionate people are about UIM. At the end of the day, I think most UIMs want the game mode to thrive, and whether you agree with this update or not, I think it'll bring more players to try out UIM. A whole new generation of ultimates willing to give a shot at something a bit out of their comfort zone, and maybe even realize over time that the journey isn't about the destination, it's about the friends you make along the way.